So, hello everyone. I'm Nina Volkanova and I'm part of Gradoscope, a collective focused on the reinvention of cities. And this discussion today is part of a series which we started in order to reflect on the effect of COVID on our society in general. And so far throughout our discussions, I noticed that COVID did not introduce some radically new ideas, but it rather accelerated current processes, such as the mobility concepts as decentralization of cities, 15-minute city, etc. So today our talk is about sustainability and the cities. And it's a topic related to COVID because it looks into the long-term being of the world in general. So now I'm just going to briefly present the participants, and we have joining us from Basel, Friederike Kluge. Friederike is a practicing architect and a professor for construction in the University of Applied Science in Constance. And in 2013, together with Mike Rermer, she founded the Basel-based office Alma Maki. So both in her practice and her teaching, she is interested in the building process and the role, agency, and responsibility of the architect there. Then we have Vesela Valcheva-Magi. She is a managing partner in the Triple Green Building Group, full service sustainability consulting and education company, and she has extensive experience with sustainability in both practice and education. And Vesela has practical hands-on experience with sustainability assessment tools and frameworks in the construction and development sector. And lastly, we have Martin Yanev, who is going to present the investor side, and he has also an extensive experience in real estate, investment and construction project management, and he has worked as a risk manager, but also as corporate banking at the BNP Paribas and HVB Bank Austria, and he's currently a managing partner in ACME, a company specialized in building and managing sustainable projects. So as I said, today's topic is sustainability, and this is not a new concept. It has been around for a very long time, and it has become part of the vocabulary in, let's say, all of the fields, from construction to banking to politics. So it seems that everyone is focused on sustainability, and it's been so overused in a way that it's lost its meaning. So for example, a project, a Masdar city is sustainable, but also vernacular. Building technologies are also sustainable. So I would just like to start by asking you to define a little bit how you understand sustainability from your own practice.
Who are you starting with?
Vesela, you can start.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction. First of all, I want to add one more thing to that introduction. I'm currently still the president of the Bulgarian Green Building Council, which is a nonprofit organization that promotes sustainable construction and development, part of a global network of green building councils. And so I've been working with sustainability since 2002, really. And for a long time, when I was a young architect, I had a very difficult time understanding what the word meant. And for me, it was an eye-opener to participate in green building council development in the US at the time. This is over a decade ago. And to understand that sustainability has a very particular definition, and it is the triple bottom line. So sustainability is the equal evolution of mankind, if you will, in terms of three sectors equally, and those are the social, environmental, but also economic. And I will keep this short, but the term becomes coined in 1987, I believe, when the United Nations evaluation reports realized that you cannot measure the development of a country based on its monetary GDP numbers and financial performance itself. You have to also look at the social and then the environmental factor. So sustainability does have a very, very specific definition from my perspective.
Thanks. Thank you a lot. Maybe okay, Martin.
So I've been in the real estate industry for more than 15 years now. And before starting my own business, I used to work as a risk manager in a corporate banking division in BNP Paribas. But anyway, for us as a developer, so we realized that building green brings brand recognition, commercial value, and lowers risk in long term. So investors, banks, and homeowners are beginning to recognize the value of going green. And it means living or working in a building that reduces energy costs, saves on water usage, and uses the right building materials. It's also about ensuring quality indoor ambience and considering how to ensure the sustainability of the planet. That's the understanding of sustainability in our industry.
Frederic, I'm very curious about your perspective as a practicing architect.
Yeah, for me, it's more, I'm happy about the very well definitions. Of course, it has a defined meaning, but for me, actually, I'd say as an architect, sustainable construction is a construction for the future, so that we do not harm nature and we can preserve the ecological system, that we do not harm the animals, nor the plants or the humans. So that we are using the buildings for a certain amount of time, that we strengthen the social interactivity in our buildings, and that we don't get rid of the buildings after a short amount of time, and that we have lots of waste problems, and that we also preserve while constructing the resources of our planet, because this is the current problem we do have, that we have the 40% of CO2 emissions in the construction and the 50% of waste that is accumulated in the constructions, and we use up to 90% of resources. So this is a big responsibility as well that sustainable construction means for me. So we haven't, I think, as architects yet realized how big our share is in this crisis. So yeah, I think it is a big responsibility, but it's also a great possibility as a designer. So in our own practice, we see that being concerned about these questions, that brings a lot of also exciting new fields for us to experiment and discover new design strategies. So it's a very joyful task as well, and we are happy to work all of a sudden with a lot more meaningful things as we have been working maybe before. So summarized, I'd say construction, sustainable construction on sustainability means to be confronted with a huge problem, even an emergency situation for mankind, but also to have a lot of wonderful opportunities to reinvent our society and in the buildings we use. So there's something better to discover. This is my point of view as a designer, of course.
Thanks a lot. I mean, you're pointing on a subject which I think it's also very crucial. For example, in the European Union, around 60% of the waste comes from construction. And I think there are a lot of actually people on like policy levels, but also architects, but as investors and municipalities who will be pressed to tackle this issue a lot. And then to go back to the certificate system, which I think it's such a crucial instrument for funding, financing, but also ensuring the value of a building to be sustainable. I'm interested how you're going to react to the quote, for example, that Carl Elefante said, I think 2008 already, that the greenest building is the one who is already built, which is referring to what Frederic was saying. And I'm very interested into how this standardized methodology for the certificate system, which could be very helpful, is responding to these, let's say, global challenges. Here, Vesela and Martin.
Sure. So certification, green building certification, it's on the one hand, it's a very useful and truly a valuable methodology. On the other hand, in a conversation like this, where we're talking about principal issues and challenges in their core essence, so to speak, I think it's important for people to understand that green building certification tools were created in order to raise the average condition of operations and business as usual in the design and construction industry by a slight amount. So what I'm saying here is to follow up on what Friederike was talking about, being a visionary basically and imagining, coming up with new solutions. Green building certification is not the end all, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in terms of revolutionizing the industry. It's simply a benchmark tool that helps you start from a basis level and compare your building, your design and construction process to an average scenario. Now, that said, it is extremely, extremely useful for market transformation. So in order for us to get anywhere, right, you can't manage what you can't measure. I think there's a quote like that. And it's amazing working in the Green Building Council NGO sector, working on a lot of government analyses and city projects and even international campaigns, how little comparative data we have about how we do things, country to country, continent to continent, even within the United States or within the European Union. Our metrics for how we do things vary tremendously. Also, a lot of countries, Bulgaria in particular, lack a whole bunch of data. We don't know. We don't know what the annual, I mean, again, saying that is, I'm putting myself out there for many people to jump and say, of course we do, we have statistics, but let's face it, there's still a lot of information that we don't have because it isn't measured. So the purpose of certification instruments is to create that benchmark. It's to create that basis level in order for you to compare yourself to and to be able to say, my building reduced waste reduction by X%. My building saves this much water compared to what is always the question. So they're very useful tools. Finally, just to wrap up on your comment about the greenest building being the one that's already built. Of course, we all recognize in the industry that, it's like the elephant in the room, the existing building stock in the world. We have so many existing buildings, so many, unfortunately, derelict buildings that we are not doing anything with, buildings that are just sitting empty, whether they're privately owned or very often nationally owned. So again, there is certification tools for how to take an old building that is perhaps no longer functional in its original intent and, salvage it instead of knocking it down, because we're talking about embodied energy. So, the embodied energy here is the sustainability metric that makes existing buildings extremely green just by default, if you will. Now, of course, they need to be updated in terms of electrical, mechanical, et cetera, to meet the needs of today, but there are tools for that as well.
Okay. And Martin, so you as an investor, I was wondering how you're responding to, let's say, the social aspects of sustainability, because there is it's been a lot of also criticism about, let's say, the greenwashing, that is become like a brand, a frame to put for, let's say, just selling purposes, but a lot of the investors don't go beyond this, let's say, very basic touching of the green building.
Because probably in Bulgaria, most of the investors and developers, they do not understand the methodology and how they could create value by designing such buildings. So when designed to perform well from the start, buildings consume less energy and water, which benefits those who manage, own, or rent them through lower operating expenses. So when as properties are sold, this value can be passed directly to customers through utility savings, offering a credible way for developers to distinguish their properties on the market. So in this way, developers can improve their business models while demonstrating both customer care and environmental best practices. So I think, let me just, there is a study which exists in developed world, providing insights into the financial benefits to developers, occupiers, and banks, and in US and Europe. And these studies show that developers can command higher sales prices for green certified homes, ranging from 5 to 10% higher. Green homes sell as much as 4 times faster, and occupants save 15 to 20% on lower utility bills for green homes. And of course, resale value is up to 10% higher. And for banks, the financial institutions which are funding such projects, they enjoy up to 33% lower default rates from buyers of green homes. And I think these are the benefits of building green.
Okay, and Federica, what would you say that the agency of the architect is in all of this discourse? I was wondering if architects have any agency at all, because usually work, let's say it's a client-based service. So it's kind of, you have to react on the wishes and ambitions of a client. And I was wondering, you saying that, you know, it's about bringing awareness to the practice of a design there. What would you say, yeah, the agency of the architect actually is or could be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I've said before, I think we have really big problems. So first of all, I think we have to talk about this problem to everybody and all the time. So we have to talk to other architects. We have to talk to politicians, to clients, to contractors, also to architects magazines, to our students, and also to the bank advisors. So let's talk about this problem so everybody knows and is aware that there's a problem. And we found out that there is not enough knowledge around, or the awareness is not there. So once we talk about it, we can find, or we also found a lot of positive energies. So lots of people want to change things, but they just don't know how. Also, lots of architects want to build construction friendly, and they just don't know how they do it. So I think lots of people in their private lives, they're very eco-friendly, but they haven't really thought about using the professional life to also introduce eco-friendliness. And there's you can reach way bigger results in the professional life. So we also noticed that there's a big gap between the science and the practice. So the architects, they don't read the books or the studies, so they have to educate themselves right now. So we think that now we should really focus on these results of science. And yeah, so how this was a problem we really dealt with. How can we distribute the knowledge, how good eco-friendly practice can look like? And then we founded the group Countdown 2030, which is a group of architects and architect practices that we founded here in Basel. And we talked to scientists and experts and other professionals that are really into the subjects. And we collected the basic knowledge. And now we communicate this knowledge in very few words, in easy way to understand what has to be done now. And I show these postcards which just came out. These are in German, but I think we're working right now on an international version. And those have different scales. It's the scale of the city, of a building, and of a detail. And we communicate the biggest thing one can do right when constructing. So construct as little as possible, reuse structures, for example, repair houses, or use concrete just where it's urgently needed to avoid waste, of course, or also construct your house not only for humans, but also for animals and the biodiversity. And we hope that with these basic knowledges, now architects can creatively invent new sustainable designs, so that sustainability is not anymore an add-on that comes later on in the planning phase, but we use this knowledge right from the beginning to invent new design. And I think this motivates people and shows that just working all together with these with these new rules in architecture practice, we can really change something and make a difference.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I think you are tackling on a subject which I think we're all aware of, that as sustainability in construction, it's not just a responsibility of an architect or an investor or the politician. It's about understanding and working together. And now it has become a core topic also in the, let's say, European Union policies, with a lot of let's say discourse also launched with the European Green Deal and the very new initiative of the European Bauhaus, which also tries to collect all of this energy and knowledge and find ways to distribute it better. And there I was wondering, basically when you go through the European Bauhaus initiatives, you see these sustainability, let's say, tools or projects or practices which range from very, very technical to, let's say, very vernacular and, let's say, very
common sense.
Totally common sense. And it has this like a range amount of discourses and practices, but they're not really communicating to each other. And I was wondering what type of formats, tools there should be to create this type of communication between science and practice and policy. I think Vesela mentioned, let's say, one tool that is about, let's say, community impact, but I really agree also with Federica that there has been a lot of conversations, but on very different tables.
Well, if I could comment here, I do. So I'm an architect by education, and so are my parents actually. So I come from a line of architects, and the first thing that I was impressed by when I first began working in a very nice design architecture firm was that there was a lot of copy paste. There was a lot of, even with good designers, the specifications and the technical aspect of the job, nobody really wanted to know, what's the newest out there. We knew that there were things wrong with certain products, glues and volatile organic compounds, which are emissions that emit harmful chemicals into the interior space of homes and offices. That information was available, but nobody wanted to take the next step and perhaps specify a carpet. At the time, that was a new thing. There was carpets that did not have these chemicals, which were a little bit more expensive. There was paints that did not have volatile organic compounds in them that were a little bit more expensive. So this is what turned me away from architecture in terms of, not that it turned me away from architecture, but it made me want to go into the field that has the practical application of how do we do it sustainably. And so, again, as I said previously, the certification systems are not, they're not spectacular. They don't result in the greenest project, But what they do is they find the right balance. And, you know, granted, all of these tools, which are DGNB, the German rating system, BREEAM, the British rating system, LEED, the American rating system, these have been developed by huge groups of architects, engineers, and scientists, and all sorts of representatives, people from the product industry, leaders in each of the respective industries. So my point is that these tools are the place where I see science meeting common sense, meeting old practices that shouldn't be forgotten, that are basic and simple, but they are very sustainable in design and in construction. The concept itself of local materials, I mean, if you think about it, back in the day, you built out of local because that's what there was available to you around wherever you were located. So if you're in a mountainous place, you build out of wood and stone. If you're in Mexico, you build out of earth and, you know, whatever. So a lot of these things have kind of lost, and this is where I'm going to segue to Martin, because all of this is great and we do have the tools. But what we have to battle from my perspective, and this is why I enjoy participating in nonprofit organizations, is the profit factor. So no matter what kind of green programs and great intentions and good architects we have out there, you have your developer. And your developer, now, Martin, I'm putting you in the bad guy seat, but you're an example of the good guys. The developer wants to he has a property and he needs to maximize his investment. So the time is coming where that maximizing of the investment will result in green projects because of a top-down, you know, green ratings on the stock market, all kinds of real estate incentives at this point for green building that exists out there through banks, through green bonds, through reduced permitting processes that exist in various places. But the point is that what we're battling is that old school thinking of, I'm going to build it, I'm going to flip it, and all that you're concerned about is making money. So we can't ignore that this is still a huge amount of the people who are developing communities, neighborhoods, buildings. So again, the certification tools, to me, where they can be criticized for not being aggressive enough, they're also extremely helpful for those people. Because if it even saves 10% energy by that investor using a green building rating system simply to increase his marketing and boost his profitability in terms of sales, but through the use of the system, you do some very specific, as you pointed out, technical calculations, but also some common sense moves. And that results in savings, and it results in environmental, you know, an environmental approach to the process of design and construction. So Martin, do you want to build on that from an investor perspective?
I fully agree with you. And unfortunately, a small percentage of buildings are certified in Bulgaria. But recently, green buildings have started to gain a foothold, and indicating a better way forward is possible. So the trend can be attributed to a greater understanding about the value of certification, the competitive instinct to elbow out peers still building conventionally, and to genuine response to do as little harm as possible to increasingly threatened environment. So in some emerging markets, there are incentives cropping up and encouraging green buildings. And banks and governments increasingly offering preferential financial rates and progressive government policies. For example, in Romania, they've started with these green mortgages, and when for instance, a buyer buys a property in a green certified building, he or she becomes a much better financial terms and conditions. I mean, better mortgage rates. And all these incentives would, of course, increase the volume of certified buildings, and understanding how these green certified buildings could become a real, I don't know,
the standard.
Standard.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in Bulgaria, there are no incentives, and probably the government and the policymakers there, they do not understand, or they do not want to understand what is behind this standard and what is behind these green certified buildings, but they should understand. And in the future, I'm quite optimistic about this, that this will change. So as we see in the office market now, most of the buildings which are being developed are certified, and the buildings that are already constructed and completed, they also started to be certified, because they understand that without this green certification, they could not attract tenants. I mean, so this is the.
Thanks, Martin. I'd like to follow on what actually Vesela said, that it's about battling this profit. And I think, I'm very curious how you see it, because it's like we're all part of an industry that is, let's say, based on profit. I mean, even architects are dependent on construction as an industry, as like we're all part of this, let's say, narrative for profit. And I was wondering, how can an industry, let's say, reinvent itself to not be battling for profit when we're actually all of us dependent on this? It's my question. And it's also about the certificate, because we also see so much of speculation, of building speculation throughout the world in each context. Let's say from London to Mumbai, Sofia, we have a lot of building speculation. And I think there it's also important, when you think about certificate, we also should be able to, let's say, measure the type of speculation there is behind such a project.
So, Friederike, maybe you want to talk about the profit part?
We always talked about it, that of course it's a problem also that labor does cost so much and material doesn't cost so much. And this is something about the pricings. You can make a lot of money because we are not paying for the waste, we are not paying for bad resources or the materials, how we gathered them. So it's interesting, when we were working on these postcards, we always worked very much from the point of view of an architect, and we thought, okay, we have such a big responsibility with 40% of CO2 emissions, but all of a sudden we found out, okay, maybe we should just go to politics and try not to change something there and not in our profession, because we don't have the possibilities, as Vesela said before. It's just not in our possibilities. It's up to the investor. And we talk, of course, we're talking a lot about the CO2 taxes. Of course, this would really change something, because we are not paying for all the damages we do in the future. And I think now we've found out, okay, this is also just an economic system that does just not work. We have to think in a circular economy. Right now, we just want to grow without limits. And it's really easy to understand that this just does not work. We are following a linear track with full speed, even as we know that this is a dead-end road. So there are planetary boundaries, and we have to price this track. And for us as architects, we always find out that looking from an economic way, we are too expensive. Our work is too expensive to make experiments. And I think this is maybe a possibility to change, that material gets very much more expensive and the labor less expensive. So how could this work?
Yeah, and in terms of profit, I think what we are already seeing and will be seeing a lot more of, I can only assume, is the change of how we perceive profit. So we're accustomed to, as Frederica said, a very linear approach where you add A plus B and you get C. So what's happening now is that, again, so this is where I go back to that definition of sustainability being a triple bottom line. So you evaluate your financial profit compared with your environmental impact from this profit and the social implications that you are also creating through your profit. And I think circular economy, I don't personally like that term because I find that there is a level, again, if we're to have a cultural revolution, if you will, because that's what is required here ultimately, we really need to be very sensitive in the way that things are marketed and worded. So I speak to some people about, even within my own family, about circular economy or sustainability, and they basically say it's nonsense. That climate change is nonsense because the Earth has always changed its atmosphere over the centuries and whatever. And what is circular economy? What do you want me to do now? Eat my jeans after they wear out? And so again, I don't like the term because I think it's oversimplifying something that is much more complex. What we should be doing is we should be giving value to the new profit, which is, yes, you make money, perhaps a little less, because you can't battle greed, human greed otherwise. People that want to make money, this is their end all goal. So that has to be respected and understood as a culture. We're not going to overnight wake up tomorrow and become hippies. That's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So you have to somehow leverage the problems that Frederica was talking about, which are huge, and format them in a way where they can become a heartfelt interest for people who are in a typical linear mentality and in a position of business where they're chasing profit margins, but perhaps they really care about the place that they're from, and they themselves don't enjoy going fishing and seeing all the plastic trash in the river. So that speaks personally to those people, and perhaps you take a piece of their profit and they spend it on I don't know, better materials. Or my point is that unless it becomes a personal story for everybody, you can't sell sustainability. It's one of those things. It's like, it's the simplest thing on earth. You want your children to have the same world you did, at least, if not better. But yet, when it comes to business, it's very difficult to have the conversation in a way where the other side is going to understand you and buy into it. So it's, to me, the profit issue is we can't imagine that we're going to have a world where people are not going to want profit. That's not realistic. It's just, how is that profit used? How much profit is enough? And as Frederica was saying, I think the sanctional, unfortunately, aspect, which also has unfair sides to it, is going to come where people will be taxed for carbon emissions, potentially for their vehicles in the future, for the amount of waste that they, you live in Switzerland. I know that there's very strict amounts of consumer waste, and it's, the whole waste is a very clean and systematized procedure. There's no people just throwing trash everywhere in abundant quantities, where, there's other countries where we receive the trash from other countries. So yeah, the profit thing really just needs to be rethought into what is the actual cost of things when we develop.
Then Martin, I think it's let's say, an invitation for your part, as experience in the banking and funding sector, and the profit, the one who is let's say, making profit out of this green building.
Of course, there should be profits behind every.
Mm-hmm.
Behind every. We're not living in a communist society anymore, and but it's not only the profit. So of course, we have to think about the environment, and we have to think how to build more, of course, I would say more green, sustainable buildings, which are harming less the environment, because our resources are scarce. So we see that the energy costs are rising, the water the water use become more scarce, and we have to think how to decrease the energy consumption and in our buildings, of course, and in the society. And this issue could be resolved by incentives, and these incentives could be developed from the policymakers, from the government. As soon as there are not incentives, there will not be many developers looking for building green and using renewable energies in their buildings, because they don't care. Why should I invest, for instance, much more for building with geothermal energy, or with air to water heat pumps, or with other resources, because these facilities cost much more than the standards. And of course, they for the investor and the developer, they don't care about the future benefits, because they want what they want is most of the investors, I say, they want to build, sell, and that's it, take their profit, and they don't care about the future energy costs and what will happen with the occupiers, the buyers of these homes. And I think that only by really incentives by the government, this could change. I mean, incentives for tax reliefs or other incentives. I don't know. There are a lot of things that could be done. Green building could become a standard. Otherwise, we'll just talk and talk and nothing will happen. So that's why, as a society, or I don't know, as voters, we have to insist the government to implement such standards that are with incentives to people who are building and using such properties.
Thank you, Martin. Well, I certainly agree that certificate is a tool, but I also agree with Vesela that it also needs to be more aggressive, but also needs to be more aggressive on a political level. This is why, I guess also, Friederike realized at one point that there needs to be a dialogue on a very different levels on this subject. And I think, we will be constructing or participating in such dialogue because it's, let's say, a part of a global narrative currently. So now, if you have, I would like to give you the floor to share.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something else. For people, for investors, which are thinking long term, they understand the value of building green. And for investors that are thinking short term, they don't care about this. And the companies that really understand and they really implement such practices, they will succeed in the future. We're not talking about a profit that I can take right now, but we have a long-term perspective, and I'm sure that the green building, the green standards, sooner or later will become a must. This is my opinion, and we don't know when in Bulgaria, but we do our best to speed up the process. Yeah,
I think there it's an opportunity also now for for an investor who's thinking very long term to try to implement some type of different economic and profit strategies, I think, because it's a perfect time now to experiment also with and to test. Because I think from an investor point of view, one should be always trying to understand, what comes next. And in my dialogue with many of the investors here in Bulgaria, I find it very strange that they are not looking into, let's say, most of them are short term, as Martin said.
Yeah.
And for me, it's very curious to understand why is it so short term when actually it's about experimenting and testing. And I have failed currently to convince a lot of the investors to be a bit more brave with this aspect, which I think the first one who tried this.
But let me tell you something. Sorry for interrupting you. If the government implements such practices in public buildings, kindergarten, schools, this is the best example for the private sector as well. And if the government supports the private sector with, let's say, with the public-private partnership for building such buildings, this is the example. This is the example for the private sector.
Yeah. If I could give my closing remark from the perspective of from a NGO perspective, so not for profit, not as a consultant of certification. What we see globally in the green building movement is you see the market drive, raise the bar first. So the green building movement started in the US by a group of very forward-thinking architects and scientists and business people who got together and said, we can do better than what the standards are. We can do way better. And that's how the LEED rating system was created. So what you see is all of these certification tools, they're market-driven tools. And very few governments have adopted these as standards. Of course, the forward-thinking governments like in Denmark and in Sweden, and they have to some degree. But my point is that the market pushes things forward and pushes things up and raises the bar. And then when that bar is so evidently raised, usually government regulation catches up. And then the market once again creates a new version of a rating system, which raises the bar one more time as technology and practices and science provide more and more materials, tools, and methodologies to do things even better. So, it will become a standard. And then once that becomes a standard, we will already be 5 steps ahead because there'll be even better ways to do things. But the unfortunate part is that without government buy-in and a fast understanding of what's already should be a norm, you have this process happen very slowly. And in the meantime, we are, kind of wrecking our planet and not stopping things that should have been stopped a long time ago. But basically government, is reluctant to make steps like that because then that's considered radical. So it's a complex issue, but really I believe in the market and in the private sector. Government does need to regulate and government does need to provide incentive, but it is the market that is going to push this thing forward.
Federica, would you agree that is the market who will push the agenda forward?
Yeah, yeah, I'm not happy about this answer, but yes, I think it's the only possibility. I think everybody, as I said before, we have to talk about it to make that everybody is aware of the problem. And I mean, maybe coming back to the Corona crisis, all of a sudden it was necessary to do something, and people came together and discussed, the scientifics, the politicians, and this was really everybody. Worked with it. Everybody accepted or almost everybody accepted the rules to respond to this crisis. And now we have a similar crisis where just it's maybe not so clear the problems that will come ahead in future. And the big problem is that we cannot stop then once we realize that we have the problem, even more than yet now, that we cannot change it anymore. So right now we have to convince everybody that we have this crisis coming up to us, and then also help the politicians to make further steps, to have the rules and the new laws to follow, and then also that the market follows. So I think this is something that it depends on everybody to reach these goals. But I think we should have some crisis parliament, people coming together with all the knowledge and discuss, as you said, interdisciplinary, a group that looks what should be the next steps to get control of this crisis.
I think, let me summarize. I think we should put it in a more simple way. There are 4 major market players, and they should understand the benefits of building green, of sustainability. So first, the homeowners. For homeowners, significant utility savings, better resale value, and better thermal comfort. For developers, product differentiation and increased marketability. For governments, opportunities to raise the bar on building regulations and create fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. For investors and developers, lower investment risk and wider share of the market. These are for me, the benefits of sustainable construction for all of these 4 market players.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Thank you for participating. I think, the remark, or let's say our last discussion part, where we said that the market is a driving force. It's interesting, but I also think that the market is responding. It's a reactive instrument. It's not really proactive. It's reacting to social movement tendency, let's say, on our society pattern. So I really think that it's first about introducing them, and as Vesela said, making this a personal story, and only then the market would react to it, I suppose. Otherwise, it's really, it won't move forward just by market-driven profit, I guess. But thank you all for participating again, and it has been a very interesting discussion for me. And I hope to have chance to discuss this again in different contexts. But I guess it will, there will be much more of those discussions on various levels.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Ina.